From 1878 to 1968, there were 71 lake captains that called Bayview, Wisconsin, on the shore of Lake Michigan, their home. While they lived here, they captained 195 different ships, from tugboats to schooners to steamships, in voyages that took them to every one of the Great Lakes. Join us now for another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we explore not only these captains, but also their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes.
Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we discuss the lives, homes, sailing adventures of Bayview's 71 different lake captains. They all lived here from 1878 to 1968, 90 years, and during that time they captained 95 different ships. And those of you probably already know that have been watching this channel for a while, especially for the new people, maybe this is your first time, this YouTube channel's purpose is to discuss those lake captains and what they did, where they lived, their families, etc. Now this episode is not about a lake captain, so I think this is 2 in a row here now that I've given you that we're not about a lake captain. Sorry about that. Oh, we gotta wait for an airplane. Hold on. But this episode is about Milwaukee's female ship owners. Now, the reason I'm choosing to present this episode to you now is because Johanna Brotch, who lived in this house, I'm filming with these beautiful lilies behind me. in her backyard. It's quite nice. Another nice day in Bayview. But in order to determine that she was Bayview's only female ship owner, I had to check all of Milwaukee's female ship owners. Now, when I first saw that she owned 2 schooners, I wondered to myself, I wonder how many female ship owners there were in the Great Lakes at that time. Could she be the first? Oh. Well, I took a look, and after only a week of searching, I discovered quite a few women in other states, in Canada, that preceded her. And so that title, award, honor, I guess is a better term for it, was out. So Great Lakes gone, first in America gone. How about Wisconsin? Could she have been the first female ship owner in Wisconsin? Again, after about 7 days, negative ghostwriter. She wasn't. So, as we work our way down the totem pole, Great Lakes, America, Wisconsin, what's next? Milwaukee. So, I checked all the female ship owners in Milwaukee, and nope, Johanna was not in that group. Excuse me, she was in that group because Bayview's part of Milwaukee, but she wasn't the first and only. Well, the bottom rung of the totem pole, way down after all those, is Bayview. So I looked in Bayview, no female ship owners except for Johanna Brotch, hence the marker in the front and the honor, Bayview's first one and only female ship owner. Okay, so you say, well, that's interesting and good, but then what I also began to think about is, when I was doing all this research, I didn't see a list compiled anywhere of Milwaukee's female ship owners. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, I've created it for the first time. So, since I did that, I decided what I would do is put all those names in the appendix of both of my books, which you'll see here in the video, with the names and where to find them. That complete list is in those books. And also, I wanted to publish it here on YouTube. So published in 3 different locations. I did not go as far in depth as I did with the captains on looking at all of these different women. But I did come across some pretty interesting information for quite a few of them, and I included that in just a single comment section below the pertinent data, where they lived, the ship they owned, why they lived there, etc. So as you listen to Simon Stanhope, our narrator here next, is going to walk you through it. I'll have the text of each up on the screen so you can follow along, and I think you'll find it very, very interesting. Just a quick note. In one of the comments, one of the women was a surgeon, and I wonder how many female surgeons there were at that time, talking 1890s, and how many of them were ship owners? Probably not too many. Now, when you total up the total number of ship owners, men and women, in Milwaukee, the age of sail and steam, you find there were 1,475 ship owners. That's the number I got, total, for all of them. Okay, then you ask, well, okay, of that, how many were women? And the answer is, of the nearly 1,500, only 75 were women. And of the 75, only 50 actually lived here in Milwaukee. The other 25, the vessel was registered here. Yep, they were the owner, but they lived elsewhere. So they're registered as a Milwaukee owner, but they're not living here, if that makes any sense there. So Of the 50, many were immigrants, just as we find when we look at the lake captains, the majority of which were immigrants. Same locations they immigrated from, Northern Europe, for the most part, and just fascinating information. So I've compiled it all here for you. You're seeing it, as far as I'm concerned, for the very first time. It's the first time it's ever been done. And so there's a lot of real good and interesting history here. I also rank ordered the women owners in terms of numbers of vessels owned. And so I know, and I also know I have marked the very first female ship owner in Milwaukee, which was not Johanna. Johanna was first in Bayview. So, pretty good stuff, I think. I think you'll enjoy it. I'm going to turn it over here to Simon Stanhope, and he can take you through it now. So don't forget, hats off to our Bayview Lake captains. I will see you in the next episode. And don't forget to come to the dedication ceremony for the marker here at Johanna Brotch's house at 515 East Lincoln Avenue, Saturday, 13 July, 11 a.m., and you get to go in her house afterwards. How can you beat it? We even have refreshments. Okay, bye-bye.
Welcome to another installment of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains, where we discuss the lives of the 71 different lake captains that once lived in Bayview, Wisconsin, during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, in the age of sail and steam. This discussion will include their ships, their homes, their families, and their lifetime of sailing adventures on the Great Lakes. Today we will be discussing Milwaukee's female ship owners. In a previous episode, we disclosed the new discovery that Johanna Brotch of 515 East Lincoln Avenue was and is Bayview's first one and only female shipowner. This discovery came about by researching all female shipowners throughout Milwaukee's history, and then finding their home or homes at the time they owned these ships. Those house addresses found were then examined to determine if any of them were in Bayview. Only Johanna's was. With this task and goal completed, it was then decided to publish the list of Milwaukee's female shipowners compiled, because this was and is the only such list that exists and/or has been published. This makes it a first in Milwaukee maritime research history. We think it's important for people to know. In fact, there is so much interesting and intriguing information in this list that hopefully a future author or authors can research these pioneer women further. While this list is complete, there is undoubtedly more information out there to be found about them. What you see here really only scratches the surface, as our purpose was only to discover the women shipowners of Milwaukee and where they lived. The comments you will see about them is merely just passing information found as the list was being compiled. As with all previous episodes on this channel, the sources for all of the information presented in this episode can be found in the book Bayview, Town of Lake Captains. In addition, due to its connection with Johanna Brotch, the information in this episode and its sources are also included in the companion volume to this book, A Brother Helps His Sister, The True Story of William A. Draves, The Schooner Arctic, and the House at 515 East Lincoln Avenue. Both books contain 60 pages each of sources in 9-point font, single-spaced. This research took many years to gather and complete. Again, this is the first time any information, let alone a complete list, of female shipowners in Milwaukee has ever been compiled and published. Here is the summary of what the research into Milwaukee's female shipowners uncovered. Johanna Brotch is confirmed as Bayview's first and only female shipowner. She owned at least 2 schooners while living in Bayview at 117 Lincoln Avenue. Post-1930 is 515 East Lincoln Avenue. The Sassacus and the Arctic, both captained by her husband John Brotch, Bayview's most prolific schooner captain. Johanna may have also owned 2 more, given her late captain husband John Brotch's occupational summary in the U.S. Census and Milwaukee City Directories, clearly showing he captained 2 and possibly 3 more probable schooners that are unnamed and the paperwork as yet undiscovered. None of the other female shipowners have Bayview addresses while they were owners. Only 75 out of the roughly 1,475 total shipowners registering ships in Milwaukee were women. This equates to about 5%. However, of these 75 women owners, only 50 actually lived in Milwaukee, which is the list that we will provide next. This equates to 3%. The first woman in Milwaukee to own a ship was Sarah F. Childs, 1812 to 1900. Born in Connecticut, she owned the barkentine Shanghai from 1859 to 1863. During this time, she lived in the 8th Ward with famous Milwaukee shipbuilder James M. Jones, along with 8 other boarders. Interestingly, 17 years after selling the Shanghai, and thus becoming a former shipowner, she moved to the town of Lake, forerunner to Bayview. Of the 50 women Milwaukee owners, 28 had husbands that were Lake captains, and 27 of these inherited the ship from them when they died. The sole exception to this was Bayview's Johanna Brotch, who was owner while her husband was the ship's captain. Only 3 of the 50 women Milwaukee owners were able to vote when they owned their respective ships. Alice B. Norris is the only woman owner to have her own ship named after her. She is also the most prolific female shipowner in Milwaukee maritime history, at 7 vessels. Perhaps most significant, after her husband, Greenleaf D. Norris, died, she took over his ship chandlery, ship supplies business, and ran it and all of these 7 vessels successfully for the next 44 years, making her truly Milwaukee's only female shipping magnate. Of the 50, 3 have birthplaces that are not recorded or are unknown. The others break down as follows. USA-born 20, Wisconsin 13, New York 3, Connecticut 1, Indiana 1, Ohio 1, Massachusetts 1. Foreign-born 27, Germany 10, Ireland 6, Norway 4, Prussia 3, Scotland 3, England 1. Here is the complete list of all 50 female shipowners in Milwaukee maritime history, the ships they owned, when they owned them, their Milwaukee addresses at the time of ownership, and related interesting facts uncovered during the research on them. These addresses are all pre-1930, unless the residence date is after that. The only female Bayview shipowner found is highlighted in red. A search was made for photos of these women, however, only 2 were found, and they are included in the slides. 1. Mary Arvidsson, born in Wisconsin in 1849, lived at 3 different Milwaukee addresses during her ownership of the schooner Arrow from 1879 to 81. Husband Frank, born in Sweden, was a lake captain, probably of the Arrow, and died sometime between June and December 1881. Mary sold the Arrow over the winter of 1881. He and Mary had 2 sons and daughters. 2. Regina Barlash, born in Germany in 1878, lived in 2 different Milwaukee homes while owning the fishing tug Illinois from 1932 to 36. Her husband worked as crew on a fishing tug in 1920. He and Regina may have bought this tug, putting it in her name, with him probably captain. 3. Anne Boyd, born in Ireland in 1834, lived in Erie Street while owner of the sloop William H. Hinsdale from 1865 to 66. Her husband, Andrew Boyd, born in Scotland, was co-owner 1862 through April 1865, and was crew of this sloop and fell overboard on 19th November 1863 and drowned. It appears she inherited it from him, then sold her share in May 1866. They had one daughter, Isabella. 4. Johanna Brotch, 1857 to 1948. Born in Prussia, lived on then Lincoln Avenue while owner of the schooners Sassacus in 1888 and Arctic in 1893 to 94. She is the only female shipowner on this list that lived in Bayview. All the others are Milwaukee addresses. Her husband, John Brotch, is Bayview's most prolific schooner captain. Details are provided in the 550-page book about them, titled A Brother Helps His Sister, The True Story of William A. Draves, the schooner Arctic, and the house at 515 East Lincoln Avenue. Note the pre-1930 address of 117 Lincoln Avenue is today 515 East Lincoln Avenue. 5. Catherine Calbick, born in England in 1850, lived at two different Milwaukee addresses during her ownership of the scow schooner Gladiator, 1881 through 84. Her husband James, a lake captain, was likely captain during her ownership. While he is not listed as captain, and others are, because shipbroker H.J. Pawley is also an owner and likely had a stable of captains he moved around, it's probable James Calbick was captain, hence his wife's involvement as an owner. Catherine and James had two daughters, Clara and Patricia. 6. Sarah Childs, 1812 to 1900, born in Connecticut, lived at three different Milwaukee addresses while owner of the barkentine Shanghai from 1859 through 63. Her husband was a, quote, sailor, unquote, probable lake captain in 1850, and owned her house worth $3,000, $105,000 today. Then, in 1860, her husband has apparently died, and she was living with famous Milwaukee shipbuilder and relative James M. Jones, and 8 other probable boarders in their 20s when she was 48 in 1860. She likely inherited the Shanghai after her husband died. In 1880, she moved to Town of Lake, though then as a former shipowner. 7. Bridget Cole, 1833 to 1893, born in Ireland, lived at two different Milwaukee addresses while owner of the schooner Ardent, 1870 through 78. Her husband Edward Cole was a lake captain and captain of the Ardent while she was owner. He died apparently late in the sailing season in 1878. She sold it after he died. They had 7 children. After her husband died, she became a, quote, confectioner, unquote, for the next 15 years, until she died in 1893. 8. Julia Detlef, born in Germany in 1874, lived at 2 Milwaukee addresses while owner of the fishing tug Frank Brager, 1936 to 42. Listed as, quote, widow, unquote, in 1940, quote, widow Joseph, unquote, in 1942. 9. Mary Devine, born in 1868 in Scotland, lived at multiple Milwaukee addresses while owner of the sloop Mary, 1898 to 1901. 10. Emilia or Emmeline Eggers, 1851 to 1902, born in Germany, lived at 5 different Milwaukee addresses while owner of the scow schooner Sunrise from 1888 to 93. Her husband William was a lake captain. He died in 1887, and she inherited the Sunrise from him. There is another Emily/Emmeline married to a John Eggers, also a lake captain on Jones Island, but their marriage dates, birth dates, and birth locations are different, so they are 2 different people. 11. Margaret Eifer, born in Germany in 1844, lived in Milwaukee while owner of the fishing tug Dan Costello in 1882. Her husband, Andrew, was a fisherman and died about 3 years before she is first listed as owner. 12. Carrie Fitzgerald, 1864 to 1956. Born in Wisconsin. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the steamers John Plankington, 1903 to 07, and R.P. Fitzgerald, 1903. She was the wife of Frederick W. Fitzgerald, of the famous Milwaukee Fitzgerald shipping family. She inherited both ships when Frederick died, about 1903. Daughter Frederica was also co-owner from her father's will. 13. Frederica Fitzgerald, born in Wisconsin in 1893. Lived in Milwaukee while co-owner of the steamers John Plankington, 1903 to 07, and R.P. Fitzgerald, 1903. She co-owned both ships with her mother Carrie, per her father Frederick W. Fitzgerald's will when he died about 1903. 14. Phoebe Hamilton, 1844 to 1914. Born in Wisconsin. Lived at two different Milwaukee addresses while owner of the schooner Bars, 1895 to 1901, and the steamer George Burnham, 1895. Her husband, Alfred Kay, was president and treasurer of Hamilton Lime and Stone Company. Phoebe and her husband employed two servants and a coachman at their home on Prospect Avenue in 1900 and 1910. Both ships were likely used to haul lime and stone for Alfred's company. She is buried with husband Alfred at a prominent gravesite with marker in Forest Home Cemetery. 15. Mary Hove, 1847 to 1883. Born in Ireland, lived at multiple Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooners Hero, 1865 to 66, Alnwick, 1866 to 68, and Valhalla, 1868 to 75. Husband James owned a lumber yard and was also a sailor and probable lake captain. They had 4 children. 16. Emily Hunter, born in Wisconsin in 1857, lived at multiple Milwaukee addresses while owner of the schooner Angus Smith, 1881 to 1900. Probable husband Thomas was a sailor, probable lake captain, and a Civil War veteran, Company A, 10th Connecticut Infantry. He died in 1889 and is buried at Wood National Cemetery. 17. Hannah Johnson, born in Norway in 1838, lived at 7 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooner Emma Layton, 1875 to 83. Her husband, John C. Johnson, was a lake captain, and was captain of the Emma Layton during the entire time she was owner. They had 6 children, and moved to South Dakota around 1900. She died there in 1913. 18. Alice Joyce, or Alice Norris, born in Massachusetts in 1832, lived in Milwaukee while owner of the steam barge Mary Durr, a.k.a. John Spry, a.k.a. Three Brothers, 1888. Also the schooner Alice B. Norris, 1872 to 84. The schooner John Chouette, 1879 to 85. The brigantine Waucoma, 1871 to 72. The steamer Josephine, 1886 to 89. The steamer Topeka, 1889 to 1916. And the scow schooner Christie, 1879 to 82. She is the only female in Milwaukee maritime history to own the vessel named after her, the Alice B. Norris. The G.D. Norris Company was an early ship's chandler supplies company, and a later competitor or successor was the A.M. Joyce Company. G.D. Norris Co. became Joyce Norris & Co. in 1888. Alice died in 1914, but is still listed as owner for the Topeka through 1916. Her husband, Greenleaf D. Norris, died in October 1869, and it appears she inherited his company and all his ships and operated the company after his death for the next 44 years, until she died in 1914. This makes her the most prolific female shipowner in recorded Milwaukee maritime history, with 7 vessels. She is Milwaukee's female shipping magnate. 19. Elizabeth Court, 1840 to 1907, born in Prussia, lived at 3 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooner Willard A. Smith, 1890 to 91, the schooner Lem Higby, 1892 to 94, and the schooner William Aldrich, 1897 to 1907. 20. Mary Crones, born in Wisconsin in 1853, lived at 4 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooner Willard A. Smith, 1890 to 91, Lem Higby, 1892 to 94, and William Aldrich, 1897 to probably 1907. 21. Wilhelmina Crones, 1873 to 1950, born in Wisconsin, lived at 5 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooners Willard A. Smith, 1890 to 91, Lem Higby, 1892 to 94, William Aldrich, 1897 to 1914, and Lomi A. Burton, 1910 to 11. All 3 women above, Elizabeth Court, Mary Crones, and Wilhelmina, or Minnie Crones, are related to Captain Herman Crones, before he moved to Bayview. Minnie was his wife, Mary his mother, and Elizabeth Court his mother-in-law, Minnie's mother. None of these 3 women lived in Bayview while ship owners. They lived in Milwaukee during their ownership. Note Minnie married Herman on 22 July 1893, so all addresses prior to 1893 above are from her father's address. 22. Mary Larson, birth dates and place unknown. Lived at 6 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooner Leo, from 1884 to 1901. Her husband, Louis Larson, was a lake captain, and was captain of the Leo during part of the time she was owner, from 1884 to 85. Then he died in 1886. She appears to have taken on the job of, quote, confectioner, unquote, after his death, but also continued on without him as owner until the start of the sailing season in April 1901. The vessel was dismantled the next year on 20th of May 1902. 23. Bertha F. Leopold, born in 1843 in Germany, lived in Milwaukee while owner of the steamship Ontogen from 1871 to 72. Her husband, Aaron F. Leopold, was a lake captain and was likely captain of this steamship during her period of ownership. The ship was owned by the Lake Superior People's Line of steamers, offices on Erie between Main and East Water Streets. This company appears to have been held under the umbrella company of Leopold and Austrian, which was owned by 4 Leopold brothers, of which Aaron was one, and 2 Austrian brothers. There was also an Ida F. Leopold, who may have been her father, and left her the ownership in the Ontogen when he died in 1871. She and Aaron had 7 children. 24. Maggie Lockwood, 1848 to 1929, born in Wisconsin, lived in Milwaukee while owner of the schooner Arthur, 1878 to 80. She appears to have inherited the Arthur when her husband, Charles M. Johnson, who was a lake captain and was both co-owner and captain of the Arthur, died in 1878. She remarried in 1880, taking the last name Lockwood. 25. Estella Lyons, date and place of birth unknown. Owner of the U.S. LHS Hyacinth, lighthouse tender, 1946 to 56. 26. Mary A. Mellandy, 1845 to 1900, born in Wisconsin. Owner of the steam barge Colin Campbell, a.k.a. Medbury, 1892 to 93. She may have been born in Switzerland, and may also have been a, quote, surgeon and physician, unquote, in Milwaukee in the 1880s. Her brother or husband, a lumber dealer, with connections to a lumber company in Ludington, Michigan, hence the barge ownership. She appears to have died in France around 1900, and is buried in Wauwatosa with a large and substantial gravesite and marker. 27. Emily Moody, 1827 to 1919. Born in New York. Lived at 3 Milwaukee addresses while owner of the scow D.R. Holt, 1869 to 71. She went by Emma. Husband is Lake Captain James Moody, died 1883. However, he is not affiliated in any way with this vessel, and Emily did not inherit it from him, as he is listed alive in the 1870 U.S. Census. This is the only ship co-owned exclusively by women in Milwaukee maritime history. Johanna Powers co-owned it with Emily Moody from 1869 to 71, while Johanna Powers' son William was captain. 28. Lucy J. Neff, 1865 to 1955, born in Wisconsin. Lived at 3 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the bulk freighter Omaha, 1908 to 11. She inherited from her late captain husband, Sidney O. Neff, when he died in 1907. His estate was valued at about $6 million in 2017 dollars, and he and Lucy's house had 13 rooms, and they had 2 servants. He died without a will, so his probated estate can be viewed online, and is a fascinating read. She also inherited the steamer Adela Shores when he died, but sold it because it needed a lot of work, and she, quote, didn't feel competent to run the business, unquote. 29. Lavinia S. Noel, 1843 to 1921, born in New York. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the schooner Arcturus, 1869 and 1877 to 81. Her probable son appears to have been Samuel J. Noel, who was a co-owner of the Arcturus from 1870 to 77, then moves to New Jersey. However, there are no addresses for him during this time. Lavinia Noel appears in 1880 to be married to a Winslow A. Noel, who was an oil inspector and then a deputy U.S. Marshal. They had 4 children and 2 servants. 30. Elizabeth Ulrich, born in Germany in 1832, lived at 5 different Milwaukee addresses while owner of the brig ECL, 1880 to 81, the schooner Chris Glover, 1881 to 87, and the scow schooner 3 Bells, 1895 to 1901. She had 10 children. Husband Claude was a lake captain and Union Civil War veteran. He died 5th of January 1888 and is buried at the Wood National Veterans Cemetery in Milwaukee. Claude Ulrich was likely captain of the schooner Chris Glover when wife Elizabeth was owner. He was also captain of the brig ECL when it wrecked and beached at Sister Bay, Wisconsin in 1881. He was also owner of the schooner R.P. Mason in 1881, but Elizabeth was not included as co-owner. She appears to have been sole owner of the 3 Bells, buying it herself and hiring her own captain in 1895 until 1910, 7 years after her husband Claude died in 1888. 31. Caroline Olsen, 1834 to 1914, born in Norway. Lived at 3 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooner G. Pfister, 1874 to 81. Husband Andrew, also born Norway, was a lake captain, and he died in 1873 or 74, and she inherited it from him. When her husband died, she had his headstone engraved, quote, capt, unquote, Andrew Olsen. They had 4 children, and 2, Andrew and Otto, went on to become lake captains. 32. Maria Petz, 1847 to 1907, born in Bohemia. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the schooner E. Scoville, 1890 to 94. Husband J. Fred Petz was a lake captain and was co-owner and captain of the E. Scoville from 1882 to 1889, when he died. His wife Mary and son Ernst inherited ownership, and Ernst, also a lake captain, took over as captain until 1894, when he and his mother sold it. 33. Catherine Pawley, 1829 to 1916, born in Prussia. Lived at 3 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooner Baltic, 1897 to 1910, and the steamer Thomas Davidson, 1896 to 1910. Her husband, John H. Pawley, was involved in the coal and wood business with other family members, one of which was Henry J. Pawley, who also was a ship broker. Her ownership of these ships is connected to and part of these family businesses. 34. Anna M. Porth, 1856 to 1915, born in Wisconsin. Lived in Milwaukee, while owner of the schooner Oneida, 1886, and the schooner Black Hawk, 1886 to 87. Her husband, Henry C. Porth, was a lake captain and captain of the Oneida when he died in April 1886, whereupon Anne inherited it and then hired her own captain and operated the Oneida for the rest of the 1886 sailing season, selling it at the end of the season in November 1886. She likely also inherited the Black Hawk when her husband died, and operated it also for the 1886 season. They had 1 daughter. 35. Johanna Powers, 1816 to 1891, born in Ireland. Lived at 3 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the scow D.R. Holt, 1869 to 71. Johanna Powers co-owned it with Emily Moody from 1869 to 71, while Johanna Powers' son William was captain. Johanna's husband, Anthony, was not in the maritime business, so she got involved through her son. 36. Johannette Ressa, 1847 to 1906, born in Milwaukee. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the steamer Susie Chipman, 1887 to 89. Her husband was Christopher S. Ressa, part of the firm of Chipman and Ressa, with D.W. Chipman a co-owner of the Susie Chipman. She and Christopher had 7 children, 3 died in infancy. They left Milwaukee in 1899 and moved to Hurley, Wisconsin. 37. Mary Richardson, born in 1831 in Ireland. Lived at 2 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the scow schooner Milton, 1878 to 79. 38. Mary Richardson, born in Indiana in 1833. Lived at 6 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooner John P. Ward, 1878 to 81, the propeller Hilton, 1888 to 89, and the Silver Spray, 1896 to 1903. This data is confusing, due to multiple people with the same name. These could be the same person. Regardless, neither of these apparently 2 different ship owners lived in Bayview during the time they were owners. Mary A.'s husband, Thomas J. Richardson, was a lake captain and died on 20th of September 1902. In 1882, he experimented using crude oil for fuel in the Hilton, possibly the first to do so in Milwaukee, working with a Mr. Zack, who invented the process. Mary E. appears to have been Thomas J.'s son's wife, of the same name, Thomas J. Richardson. Both of Thomas J.'s and Mary A.'s, or C.'s, sons, Thomas J. and Frank Richardson, were Bayview Lake captains, living there later, beginning in 1911. 39. Augusta Rosenstock, born in 1847 in Germany. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the fishing tug Arthur, 1896 to 97. Her husband Gustav was a fisherman, likely captain, and died in 1893. After Gustav died, his son Charles took over as captain until he died in 1896, possibly aged 23. Augusta then took over as owner and sold the tug the next year, 1897, probably early in the year. She is last listed living with another son in 1920. 40. Julia G. Saveland, born in Norway in 1832. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the schooner Saveland, 1888 to 90. She inherited ownership as executrix for estate of her husband, Zachariah Saveland, when he died in 1880. Official ownership delayed, probably due to her husband's will concluding formally. Her formal name on her gravestone in Forest Home Cemetery, where she is buried with Zachariah, is Gunhilda Johanna Julia Brady Saveland. 41. Pauline Saveland, 1806 to 1876. Born in Norway. Lived at two different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the schooner Monitor, 1864 to 80. She inherited ownership after her late captain husband, Captain Thomas Tennis Saveland, died in 1862. Ownership transfer delayed to 1880, probably from concluding his will. 42. Hilda Schulthis, 1865 to 1952, born in Prussia. Lived at two different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the fishing tug Dan Costello, 1903 to 05 and 1906 to 07. Her husband Conrad was a fisherman. They had 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son. Her maiden name was Tews, of the Tews fishing family of Milwaukee, which had a fish store on Lincoln Avenue. 43. Christine Sheriffs, 1828 to 1913, born in Scotland. Lived at 4 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the steam barge Joys, 1890 through 1898. The 1905 Wisconsin census lists her occupation as, quote, capitalist, unquote. Her husband James owned a machine shop and appeared to make propellers and wheels. She appears to have bought the Joys on her own 3 years after his death, so she probably took over running the business after his death. 44. Anna or Anne M. Sherlock, 1810 to 1900. Born in Ohio. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the steamship Hilton, 1891 to 92. Mother or mother-in-law of Captain Thomas J. Richardson the Elder. She sold the Hilton to him for $1 in December 1892. 45. Mary Spinks, 1829 to 1896. Born in Scotland. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the G.D. Norris, 1866 to 68. Her husband was Henry B. Spinks, Lake Captain, and he is listed as its captain during the time wife Mary was co-owner. He had been captain and co-owner before she became co-owner. Then he reverted to just captain. They are buried together at Forest Home Cemetery. 46. Elizabeth Swinburne, 1832 to 1925, born in New York. Lived at 2 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the James Garrett, 1880 to 83. Elizabeth's husband, Daniel Swinburne, was a lake captain. He had been an owner of this schooner in 1873 to 77, but he was no longer associated with it when she was owner from 1880 to 83. They had 5 children, 2 of which died as babies. 47. Sarah Taberner, 1835 to 1870. Born in Ireland. Lived at 2 different Milwaukee addresses, while owner of the scow Maple Leaf, 1867 to 69. Her husband was Lake Captain William Taberner, who died about 1877. He enlisted in the Union Army in the Civil War in 1863. His civilian occupation then was, quote, sailor, unquote. She is shown in 1870 raising 4 children alone, then died later that year, aged 35, in December 1870. She immigrated to New York from Ireland in 1849 with her parents and 6 young siblings. 48. Sarah Vandercook. Date and place of birth unknown. Lived in Wisconsin while owner of the bark Golden West, 1861 to 62. No address, but 1861 Milwaukee City Directory shows a merchant forwarding company named Vandercook and Norton. No more information. And 1862 lists a, quote, D. Vandercook, unquote, as a produce merchant, living 1 Newall House, HWS Cass S. Martin. So she may have been the wife of a produce merchant, and they owned this ship to transport their goods. 49. Augusta Zacher Vanweg, 1852 to 1919, born in Prussia. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the steamer Susie Chipman, 1892. She inherited this ship from her lake captain husband Odin P. Vanweg when he died in 1889. She became co-owner with her brother Carl Robert Zacher, who apparently Odin had included in his will with wife Augusta. Her husband, Odin Peter, had been captain of the Susie Chipman since 1886. She immediately sold her share to her probable brother-in-law, Andrew C. Vanweg, who later became president of the Milwaukee Steamship Company, with his brother John Vanweg as managing owner in 1913. Altogether, the Vanweg brothers and extended family owned or captained a total of 13 different ships, excluding those of the Milwaukee Steamship Company, which were not researched. The following family history information is provided by Augusta's grandniece, Sharon Zacher Calder. Augusta Zacher Vanweg was born in 1852 in Schrebritz, Saxony, Prussia. Her husband, Lake Captain Odin Peter Vanweg, was a son of Hans and Louisa Vanweg. He was one of 4 sons, the others being Andrew, John and Hans. The Zacher family immigrated in 1870, so Augusta was 18 when they came to Milwaukee. She married Peter, Odin went by his middle name, as so many others did at that time, on 20th of July, 1876. He died in 1889, and she died in 1919. They had 1 son, Robert O., details provided on Augusta's death certificate, and 2 daughters. Robert was likely named after her brother Robert, and her husband Odin Peter Vanweg. Augusta lived with her 3 children for a few years after Peter's death. Her brother, Carl Robert, had asked her to live with him and his family, but she chose not to, according to the family. She probably had to sell the ship to live independently at that time, but by 1900 she was renting the top floor of a house on Milwaukee's 18th Street, not owned by the Zacher family, and in 1910 she and Robert were living in the upstairs of the house of her daughter and family. '50. Mary Wentworth, born in 1860 in Wisconsin. Lived in Milwaukee while owner of the sloop D.M. Norton, 1879 to 80. Her husband Charles was a lake captain and was captain of the D.M. Norton during Mary's ownership. She then sold her share in the vessel on 1st of June 1880, and Charles appears to have left the lake captain profession to work as a printer with his brother Sidney. This concludes the list of the 50 female shipowners that lived in Milwaukee. Next, we will show them listed together, ranked by total number of ships owned and the country they were born in listed. As can be seen from this ranked list, 3 have birthplaces that are not recorded or unknown. The others break down as follows: USA-born 20, Wisconsin 13, New York 3, Connecticut 1, Indiana 1, Ohio 1, Massachusetts 1. Foreign-born 27, Germany 10, Ireland 6, Norway 4, Prussia 3, Scotland 3, England 1. Thanks for watching. This photograph isn't about Bayview or its lake captains, but it's from the same era of Great Lakes maritime history. We thought we'd close with it for enjoyment, as it captures the spirit of the era. This channel and its matching website also plan to support various maritime history projects related to Bayview's lake captains. One of these is a plaque and marker with the captains' names and addresses on it, as part of the creation of the Bayview Lake Captains Historic District, which will be the first of its kind in America. If you would like to support these projects, to include this and other markers honouring Bayview's lake captains, with 100% of all contributions in all forms going to support them, please consider donating to us through the listings shown next. If, for some reason, we are unable to secure these markers, then all funds donated to this site will be given as a cash donation to the museum ship SS City of Milwaukee in Manistee, Michigan. That is the only surviving intact ship once captained by at least 2 and likely 3 different Bayview lake captains. I'm Simon Stanhope, narrator for these episodes. Join us again soon for the next chapter of Bayview, Town of Lake Captains.